What's up, guys, and welcome back to Learn to Play Legacy of the Void Edition. Very excited to be bringing you this edition. Today we're going to be taking a look at the new economic system. We're going to be talking about it. It's going to be a little bit in depth, but we're going to have fun with it, and we're really going to try to analyze this as much as possible. Remember, this is a growing process. We don't know everything for sure. We don't know all the analysis is fully exhaustive and complete and well-defined, but we're at least going to try and attempt right now. So let's first talk about the changes. There are three main changes, in my opinion, that happened to the economic system. The first one is going to be the mineral patches. It used to be 8 patches with 1,500 minerals on each of them. Now it's 750 minerals on half of them and 1,500 minerals on the other half. The gases also got a little bit of a nerf. 1,700 gas instead of the regular 2,500. About a 30%, 32% decrease in terms of gas. If we're looking at just timings, right now I'm finding that anywhere from 6 minutes to 7 minutes, around that time, depending on RNG of your harvesters going to mining, you're getting a half base economy. So 4 mineral patches will mine out, expecting 16 SEVs around there. It'll scale, it'll differ if you make a supply depot or a pylon or whatever it might be. If you're fully saturated, it's a little bit faster, of course. It's like 5 minutes and something. And then you fully mine out around the 12-minute mark, give plus or minus 1 minute. For the gases, you do mine out in exactly 11 minutes. So whatever time you started mining your gases, it's 11 minutes directly after that it completely depletes. What's important here is when it's half mined out, and this is something that we're not used to having in the regular, StarCraft Heart of the Swarm or Wings of Liberty. It never happened in the past. We never had to worry about that. And there's a very interesting situation. So I did the math. Assuming 16 SEVs, it's actually cut by like 38% of our economy. So it's not quite 50%. Of course, it depends if you take workers off, but it's a pretty sharp decrease. And what I want to bring up now is the proportion of minerals to gas that you have when you go towards that mid-game stage. Now remember, we start mining out around 6 minutes, 30 seconds, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, around there. That's regular 3 base timings in Legacy of the Void. That's when you take your 3rd base. So let's just think about that. Our main and our natural are mining out pretty soon to half base economy. Pretty soon we're on 2 base mineral economy and 3 base gas economy. That's something that's very unique, very different. What are the implications to that? Okay, well, I'm seeing a lot of times when I'm playing Protoss, Terran, or Zerg, I have this huge influx of gas, at least in the beginning stages, because I did adjust. I have this huge influx of gas, and I didn't know what to do with it. I thought the disruptor was going to be a big problem, because it's like 300 gas. How am I ever going to have 300 gas? And magically, I just have 300 gas sitting around, or 600 gas sitting around. I'm like, what the heck is going on? It doesn't make sense. And it's because I've been using Heart of the Swarm production the whole time. So Heart of the Swarm production, let's talk about it. Gas was our limiting factor, right? Gas was our limiting factor. We wanted all these great units like siege tanks and widow mines and medevacs. And if you look at it, it all takes a lot of gas. In Protoss, we wanted Colossus and High Templars and Sentries. All takes a lot of gas. And for Zerg, we wanted a lot of Hydralisks. We wanted, roaches. Okay, that's like too gas intensive. We wanted infestors, swarm hosts. We wanted vipers. We wanted ultras. We wanted broodlords, mutas, and corruptors. All the money units are in gas. But now we move over to the Legacy of the Void, and it's actually interesting because I feel like the minerals are switched in terms of limiting factors. Limiting factors allowing you to have a nice big fat army on the map. Can't do that nearly as much in Legacy of the Void than you could in Heart of the Swarm. And the main reason is the economic system. The economic system puts you at 2 base economy very, very quickly because of how fast it mines out. That's something that's really different. Now, what does that mean? We were used to seeing, 7 barracks, factory and starport production. No longer can exist. We were so used to seeing 8, 9 gateways. No longer can exist. We were so used to seeing, all queens massively producing off of all our hatcheries. Right now, it can exist. because of how Zerg works. But ordinarily, if they just stayed on the regular economic basis that Zerg was at, it cannot exist. We need to restructure how we're doing our production facilities. We need to restructure how we take a look at our minerals and our gas and how we're actually ramping up our production. Because it's no longer a system where we can just say, oh, okay, let's get medevacs, let's get widow mines, and then all the minerals are going to marines. Guess what? If we go mass medevacs and mass widow mines, we actually don't have a lot of marines to supplement those widow mines and the medevacs. It actually eats up a lot of our composition. It eats up a lot of our income and our spend, and we have to adjust accordingly. And that's something that's going to be so cool, because I really feel like it's going to go to the most prepared. No longer can you just go up to 8 gateways and then be fine for the majority of the game. No longer are we going to see that 25 gateway style, because you need to take all of those minerals, right? All those minerals and shove them over to a new base. You can't sustain 25 gateways unless you have, like, 8 bases, and that's really hard to take. You can't sustain that massive 7 to 9 barracks production in TVZ anymore, because you need to think about using those minerals to get a new base. And if you look at the barracks, if you do it in this Legacy of the Void, you're gonna make like 7 barracks, and that 6th and 7th barrack, it's gonna make you like a couple Marines, 2, 3, 4, probably not 2, 3, 4 production cycles, and then boom, you're out of money. You actually do not have the money to spend in that barracks. That's a big problem. That is a gigantic problem. So we need to start addressing this issue. It's not really an issue, but we need to address the new economic system and realize that we're going to scale down our production. We're going to be very deliberate with what we're getting, and we're also going to be, a little bit more mindful that we have to put in command centers, and we have to put in hatcheries and put in nexus into our builds that never existed anymore. Because guess what? By 6 minutes and 30 seconds, if you don't have a 4th base, you will not be having 3 base production, right? You will not have 3 base production. 6 minutes and 30 seconds is really quick, even if you do the time conversion, because we're in real time now. If you do the time conversion, I'm sure it's going to be something like 10 minutes in Heart of the Swarm. That means if you don't have a 4th base being made by 10 minutes, you're going to be behind. You're going to be in a bad position. That's something that's super unique to Legacy of the Void. I think that's something that's very interesting and very cool. So I think the real question is going to be, how fast are you going to expand, and what is your win condition? Are you going to play Battle of Attrition and just try to, outlast your opponent and defend against them, whatever it might be? Or do you play Battle of Attrition by attacking them and stopping them from taking additional bases? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to win right now in Legacy of the Void because of composition advantages that you can have. You just have more knowledge on your opponent. You catch your opponent out of position. There's so many different things that go into, you could out-harass your opponent too. There's so many different ways to beat your opponent. You really need to have a plan in Legacy of the Void, because if you don't have a plan, you're going to be disjoint from the amount of bases that you want and the amount of bases that you have. So let's say my plan is to be ultra harassive, right? I just want to harass my opponent to death. Well, I have to realize that somewhere in that harassing, I need a killing blow. I need to say, the game's over, and it'll end from here, right? Whether that be I have just superior economy and I've been able to harass and I do a 5 base and then I push, or I have a 3 base timing. I think regardless, you have to be very, very deliberate, because an extra base actually takes up a lot. You have to think it's the 400 minerals for a command center, and then for every SCV or harvester that you're mining inside of your command center, your nexus, that actually represents per minute 4.5 efficient mining workers. That is taking up your spend incredibly. So let's say we're getting our 5th base, and we're saying, okay, all of our 4 command centers, start making SCVs and send them over there. So that's we're taking our 5th base, so let's say 5 command centers. That's 5 command centers that are shoving SCVs over. Normally you do it in burst. That's about a minute long where you're just getting SCVs. Now just think about that. That's 5 command centers, times that by 4.5 harvesters per minute. We're looking at like over a base of our income dedicated just to making SCVs, just to making probes. That is a ton. That is a ton of income right there that we have to commit to a new base. So we need to be a lot more deliberate because, as I said, minerals are the limiting factor, not gas anymore. So we need to be mindful when we're spending our minerals, how we're spending them, and we need to readjust really how deliberate we are in the mid and late game stage. The second change is going to be the starting workers has moved from 6 workers to 12 workers. A lot of people are like, it's not that big of a deal. Guess what? It is a big deal. The main reason why it's a big deal is that you don't start with a pylon, you don't start with a depot. So just think of it this way. In Heart of the Swarm, we were always doing like 10 pylon, 13 gateway, 12 gateway, whatever it might be. We were doing 10 depot, 12 barracks. Well, now, just think of this. We start with 12, but you have to make your depot or pylon at 12. That's a big difference. That's a very, very big difference. Or even 13 or 14 or whatever you want to do. Even with Zerg, the earliest that you can make a pool is 12 pool. It's no longer 10 pool, which is super fast. You can't see a 6 pool. That makes it incredibly hard for our opponents to, 1, scout us, and number 2, be able to mount an assault against us. Because no matter what, relative to Heart of the Swarm, if it was really, really close, right? It was really, really close for cheeses to work in Heart of the Swarm. Now, the gateway timing is delayed. Now, the barracks timing is delayed. Now, the spawning pool is delayed relative to what we were used to seeing. So if it was close doing any of those greedy economic builds in the early stages, like a 15 Nexus, it's definitely going to be around the way we go. I'm not necessarily saying 15 Nexus is 100% the build you should always do against Zerg, but it's definitely should be showing up a larger percentage of the time, since the earliest pool that they could do is a 12 pool. And let's be real, we can hold a 12 pool. 12 pool gas, it gets a little bit tricky, especially on these maps, but we could definitely hold a 12 pool by just going 15 Nex and then probably something like a 15 gate or a 17 gateway or something like that. So that in mind, number 1 is the fact that we don't have to worry about like super fast pressure. Number 2 is that travel distance actually affects us a lot more. So think of it this way. If I take a probe and go to proxy a Terran or a proxy a Zerg, before it was 6 workers are mining and developing our base. Now it's 12 workers developing our base. So the time it takes, which is on average around 40 to 50 seconds, going from base to base or main to main, the amount of time it takes now, I'm actually mining a lot more stuff. That means my base is developed a lot faster. So even if you're moving across the map with Marines or Zealots or Stalkers or whatever it is, I'm a little bit more developed because we started at 12 workers. That being said, attacking really doesn't make sense some of the time, most of the times, relative to what we saw in Heart of the Swarm. And that's a big difference. That's why I think a lot of these builds these days are a lot more economically greedy. I was doing a build against, his name's Player 1 in Legacy of the Void, but he's KT Miso, obviously a very, very strong Terran player. I went 3 command center before I got any factory units. My opponent went a fast Cyclone and Siege Tank Drop. Killed probably 8 SCVs. I went 3 command centers into Hellion Cyclone. I took a lot of damage. Lost, as I said, a good amount of SCVs, and I was still ahead in SCVs because that opportunity cost to build stuff, the factory, the starport, all that stuff, to build all of it, it takes so much that you actually get behind so much because I've been developing a lot faster than you with this new economic system, with this new 12 SCVs that we start with. So in the beginning stage, I think we're going to see a huge decline of a lot of attacks because it's just so much better to be expanding, to be, economically driven. I think there's 2 base potential. I think there's 3 base potential. 1 base potential, it's a lot tougher to do. Last but not least, the Command Center, Nexus, and Hatchery all got a buff in terms of how much food they provide. It's +4. You might think that's not a big deal. It is for Zerg. We've seen Zerg just explode off of income. Vibe was showing me that he could do a max out at 7 minutes. 7 minutes. That's incredible. That's really, really fast. When you see something like that, a max out in 7 minutes, you have to ask yourself, how did they get there that fast? That feels so much faster, because if we do the time conversion and even, adjust for the 12 workers, in Heart of the Swarm, you couldn't max out by like 10 minutes, and that's what essentially is happening, even faster. And then you realize that it has a lot to do with the hatchery. So a lot of times, Zergs are getting 3 hatches very quickly, right? 3 bases. It's the standard in TV or ZVT and ZVP. Very, very common for that to happen. What happens now is, even though it's just 4 supply, what Zergs are able to do is drone up a lot faster, not have to get overlords in the beginning stages. And when you don't have to get overlords in the beginning stages and get drones, it's just that little extra push because of the larva inject mechanics and how it's an exponential growth. Because if I invest in a drone, I can inject a drone up and I just have a burst of drones a lot faster. It gives Zerg a very, very big advantage, and I would say overall it gives Protoss the biggest disadvantage, unfortunately. I'm sorry, Protoss, you guys out there. Protoss are just stuck in a spot where their chrono boost mechanic just doesn't keep up with the mule and the inject, and that's kind of exacerbated in this current economic system. So those are my thoughts so far. I think it's really interesting with the new economic system. Again, it's really focused around the half, the 750 minerals and 1500 minerals, half and half. I think there's a lot of very, very interesting stuff. Remember, at 6:30, we start to mine out of our main base. With Terran, it's a lot faster, and it comes in a double punch since we're using mules. We run out of our main and our natural at the same time very, very quickly. So it's something that we have to consider and we have to be very mindful of. And you guys out there have to do the math. You have to realize things are not the same. I need to adjust my production. I can't go up to that, ordinary Heart of the Swarm 3 base production until I have 4 bases, which is crazy. And even when I get 4 bases, my main and my natural are mining out pretty quickly here. So I need to think about getting my 5th base to really realize the 3 base economy. I do want to say, why is it that we're getting up to 5 base and then we can actually experience 3 base economy? Part of it is because all the minerals that we used from our first 2 bases are going to production stuff like factories, starports, gateways, all that good stuff. Even for Zerg, it would be queens, the Hydra Den, the spawning pool, etc. And then our 3rd, 4th, and 5th base, they're not having to deal with that at all, right? Our supply depots, our overlords, our pylons are already set up because of our first 2 bases. Of course, there's minimal stuff that you have to get, but at the same time, you're set to go. That's when you can start churning out. So I think 5 base is the new 3 base economy, and getting 5 base is very, very difficult, in my opinion. That's a lot of area you have to cover. So things in Legacy of the Void will not be the same from Heart of the Swarm. My last tip is for you Terran guys out there. It's involving mules. A lot of times we're so used to mining the back, so that we don't lose 30 minerals. What basically happens is mules come back and forth, and if you do it towards the closer ones, they'll die. The mules will actually die on their last cycle back. The 11th cycle, they'll actually die before getting to the command center. So you end up losing 30 minerals. We want to be doing that though. We want to be putting our mules on actually the healthiest ones. Because if you mine out the 750 mineral ones, you're actually removing a big part of your economy by doing that. Instead of going from 8 nodes of minerals, you're going to 7 nodes or 6 nodes or 5 nodes. That puts you at 0.5 mineral income base economy very, very quickly, or at least quicker than it should be. By us just losing the 30 minerals, not microing it, and putting it on the 1500 mineral ones, we actually increase our economy relative to putting it on those back ones like we're usually doing. So it's just a small little adjustment that we have to make for Legacy of the Void, and that's about it. So anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Please stay tuned for more Legacy of the Void stuff, because I will be churning out content as fast and as best as possible. Till next time, do what you love what you do. I'll catch you around.